They were not born like other children. From the first breath, the world seemed to hesitate around them, as if existence itself recoiled. Midwives swore that their cries were muted, stripped of warmth, and other infants nearby fell into unnatural silence. Mothers clutched them with unease, fathers avoided their gaze, and priests whispered that the emperor's light did not shine upon them. Dogs barked themselves hoarse in their presence, livestock refused to eat, candles guttered and died. A newborn should bring joy. These brought only dread. Throughout the Imperium, where faith saturates every corner of life, and even the lowliest citizen feels the thin thread that binds reality to the immaterium, the absence carried by these children was unbearable. They were called pariahs, blanks, untouchables, soulless. The names differed, but each sought to name the same horror, the negation of the soul. To be near them was to feel prayers dry into ash, to feel hope detach and drift away, to sense the warp itself buckling into silence. Most communities did not allow them to live. Too many stories told of mothers drowning their infants, fathers leaving them in the cold, mobs dragging them into pyres. To keep one alive was to invite whispers of heresy, for what parent would nurture a child that made the emperor's statues crack and bleed rust? Yet some survived, hidden or protected by those who mistook the absence for a curse rather than an omen. Inevitably, the black ships came. The Inquisition's vessels were feared across the galaxy, black-hulled leviathans that harvested psykers for terror. But they did not only take those who burned with dangerous gifts. In the holds, in chambers no citizen ever saw, the pariahs were confined. Where psykers writhed in madness as the warp gnawed at their fragile minds, the soulless sat in silence, untouched by demonic whispers. Many died of neglect, forgotten in the dark, yet some survived long enough to be noticed. The Inquisition knew that such creatures were rare, and in their rarity lay terrible value. Inquisitors argued endlessly over their meaning. The Ordo Hereticus saw them as proof of the emperor's wrath, weapons against witchcraft and daemons. The Ordo Xenos wondered if they were a divergent branch of humanity, a mutation designed by forgotten alien hands. The Ordo Malleus saw in them the ultimate weapon against the warp. None could explain their existence. They were a mystery written in absence, a riddle that had no answer because it had no words. Those who were not dissected in Mechanicus laboratories were taken to the Officio Assassinorum. There, the most terrifying of the assassin temples forged them into instruments of annihilation, the Culexus. Encased in skull-visored helmets, clad in psychic-dampening suits, they became void made flesh. On battlefields thick with sorcery and daemonkind, their presence was cataclysmic. Psykers collapsed in seizures, sorcerers clawed at their own eyes, daemons screamed voicelessly before disintegrating into vapor. To fight beside a Culexus was worse than fighting beside a daemon. Soldiers described a suffocating dread, as though their own hearts had forgotten how to beat. Some officers chained them at the rear until the decisive moment, unleashing them like a final curse. Others refused to requisition them at all, fearing that victory gained through such horror would hollow the souls of survivors. Even the Adeptus Astartes found themselves shaken. Veterans of 1,000 wars confessed that they would rather face the great enemy himself than march one more day with a hollow man at their flank.
And yet they could not be denied. During the Wars of Armageddon, a single Culexus broke a coven of chaos sorcerers that had incinerated 3 regiments. On Cadia, When the sky split with the great rift, squads anchored by blanks endured where others were consumed by madness. In the plague wars of Ultramar, a nameless, soulless assassin slipped into a demon forge, and the war engines simply fell inert, their machine spirits strangled into silence. But their victories carried no triumph. When the last shot was fired and the smoke cleared, no one cheered them. No hymns were sung, no medals pinned. Comrades stepped back, making the sign of the Aquila with trembling fingers, and officers avoided their eyes. It was said that even the Emperor's tarot bent and warped when a pariah approached, as if prophecy itself refused to account for them. Theologians tried to reconcile their existence. Some declared that they were born without the Emperor's spark, proof of mankind's sin. Others argued that they were his secret gift, antibodies against the infection of the warp. Radical inquisitors suggested a more chilling truth, that pariahs were not human at all, but living apertures to a deeper void, something older than the Imperium, something that whispered of an absolute nothing beyond gods and demons alike. If the warp was nightmare, perhaps the soulless were dreamless extinction. To live as one of them was torment. Stripped of love, incapable of friendship, they wandered through a galaxy that recoiled from their touch. The rare testimonies of pariahs spoke of a world drained of color, of food that tasted like ash, of voices that seemed hollow. They envied even the damned, for the damned at least drew the attention of the gods. They had nothing. When death came, it was not a release, for the warp refused to claim them. What became of their essence, if essence it could be called, was unknown. Perhaps they simply ceased, not reincarnated, not judged, but deleted. The most terrifying thought, whispered only in forbidden archives, was this: if mankind carried within it the potential for pariahs, then humanity was not wholly bound to the warp. The Imperium rests on faith that man is a psychic species, tied inexorably to the Emperor and his light. But the existence of blanks suggested a darker alternative. Perhaps mankind was never meant to be spiritual. Perhaps the warp was only a parasite feeding on a species that could have lived in silence. Perhaps the pariahs were not accidents, but glimpses of what humanity might have been, soulless, unreachable, and immune to gods. This possibility terrified even the Inquisition, for if it were true, then the Emperor himself might be seen not as mankind's savior, but as its captor, binding the species to the warp forever. In that light, the Hollow Men became not curses, but truths too unbearable to accept. And so the Imperium chose another path. It weaponized them, erased their names, and buried the implications beneath blood and silence. Yet the stories persist. In every hive, there are whispers of a boy who makes icons weep rust, of a girl who kills laughter in her school, of a soldier who marches untouched through storms of witchfire. They never live long. The black ships take them, or mobs tear them apart, or their own families end their lives. But as long as mankind endures, so too will the Hollow Men. They are the quiet reminder that horror does not always roar. Some horrors are absence, a void that bleeds into the edges of perception until even faith falters. They need no claws, no fire, no demonic visage. They simply are. And in their presence, the universe itself feels wrong, as if creation has glimpsed the shape of its own undoing. The hollow men walk on, soulless and silent, leaving behind no songs, no monuments, no prayers. Only dread, cold and unyielding, and the memory of eyes in which nothing at all resides.